to support sustainable local refining aimed to improve supply, save the country millions of dollars in petroleum product imports, and ultimately reduce the pump prices of petroleum products. After the suspension of the 6-month initial period of the Naira for Crude initiative, prices of PMS started to rise, with marketers projecting further hike before the announcement of the continuation of the program. These and more will be a focus on Nigeria Today. Thanks for joining us. I am your carrier, Clinton. With me in the studio for the conversation is Olabode Shomi. He is an energy expert and also a public affairs analyst. It's good to have you on Nigeria Today.
Good evening.
Okay, now we'll just get right into it, Olabode. We just hear, of this reduction in fuel price. Now, but before we go, into that, tell us your understanding of the, of the PMS market in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you. The PMS market in Nigeria is significantly not that different from anywhere else. It's the players that differ. And for a long time, we've not had a refinery of significant amount. And with Dangote coming in and the other refineries, there is what you can call a bit of a shift in terms of the stakeholders for the market and the dynamics. So it's a case where we used to import cars, and then all of a sudden you started having Sin and a few others who did assemblage and whatever it is that they did, which affected the market in some sense. But with PMS, it's different. It's different because PMS is a commodity. So for commodities, they have certain characteristics. Their price ranges are usually around the same. They are fungible, just like cocoa, gold, and all that. So particularly, what has happened in the past is that Dangote struck a deal, which is the getting crude for Naira. All commodities typically are priced in US dollars as the global currency. So because Nigeria is a producer of petroleum product, he was able to strike that deal. But that deal was put at a certain state for 6 months. On the strength of that deal, which was therefore on the expiration of that 6 months, the NNPCL, as we know it, or government, put a moratorium and a stop to it. Then there were discussions. And that discussions had led to what we have just heard, where the people are motivated now to say that rather than it being 6 months, it is going to be a continuum. So it's going to be basically a case where perpetually they will be getting Naira for crude oil rather than the US dollars that all the commodities come into. There are some implications to that. It's technically a subsidy of sorts, but more importantly is the fact that even the NNPC themselves are going to have some reduction in their source for forex, because NNPC does have debt and it does have people that it pays. So some of those debts are in US dollars, so they themselves have to pay. So invariably, but when you look at the overall effect in terms of the whole economy, it is significant. Because if Dangote were to start sourcing for dollars from the Nigerian economy, it's going to distort the balance of things, which includes the balance of the stability of the Naira. Once the stability of the Naira is disturbed, you're going to have inflation. Once inflation comes in, people are going to be agitated.
Okay, while you're talking about that, also tell us, this reduction in the price of fuel.
Yeah.
Because what are some of the factors that influence this reduction? Because you see, at a point it was as if it was rising, and a lot of Nigerians were apprehensive that this could also, rise up to over 1,000 that we used to buy.
So it's determined by one, for the importers, it's determined by their landing price. For the refiners, it's determined by how much they get their crude, which is their source material, and then the amount they want to sell, because they have to also factor some things, which is profit there. So it was basically an apprehension from the market to the idea that once Dangote starts selling in US dollars, the price was going to increase. So that is what that was reacting to. It was not necessarily that the factors that had come in had provoked a price increase. It is possible. I mean, depending on what the major marketers would tell us is their final cost. But what I'm saying is that there's also that market reaction in terms of the dynamics of that price. And once Dangote has come in to reduce his own price, everybody else has to follow, because typically is more than 60% of the market.
Okay, what role does the oil, the global oil market has to do with this? Because you see the Brent crude dropping, far beyond what was predicted earlier this year. So what role does it have to play in this?
It's probably, I mean, definitely has some role that it's playing, there's no doubt. But I'm not sure that that's the factor yet. Because Brent crude dropping is a nascent thing, and it's probably dropping in reaction to trade tensions and the issues in the US, and the fact that they are expecting crude from Russia, which is a major global player, to come in. Because Nigeria does about 1.7 million barrels per day. Russia does about 15 million barrels per day. And that 15 million barrels is not in the global trade, primarily because of the sanctions from Europe and the sanctions from US. Just like the tariffs that affected everywhere in the world by Trump, it did not include Russia in that. So it is expected that there's going to be some kind of agreement where that those sanctions will be removed. Once those sanctions are removed, that's additional 30 million barrels per day into the global economy. So when you look at the forces of demand and supply, it will be expected that once there's greater supply than demand, then the price will go down. So I think that is what that is reacting to. So, but it's one has to get more details into the dynamics of what's going on there. But that, even though it will affect us in many ways, starting from the budget and all that, but I don't think that that is what is responsible for the 20, 50 naira, 100 naira differences at the pump price. Okay,
now I also want to get your, maybe I would have done that earlier. What do you think? What's your reaction really to this reduction? Welcome development? Is it sustainable?
Oh, it's very sustainable because it's the market reacting. So it's just that we are not used to it, because for decades we've been having flat rates based on subsidy from government. So what government is trying to do is to ensure that whatever price we have is based on reactionary forces.
So, talk to us, how impactful has a Naira for Crude initiative, been, really?
Well, it's been on for 6 months, and for those 6 months, the players have been happy. So, that is impact. And when it was stopped, the players were not happy, and there was tension in the atmosphere. So, it's just logic to say, very logical to say that it has been impactful. It's also been impactful to the extent that it is believed that that's what has restored normalcy and calm instead of speculation to the forex issues. And most importantly, the one Nigerians want to hear, a lower price. If Nigerians can get a lower price every day till the end of the year, till it is 1 naira per liter, they will be happy. You understand? Notwithstanding whatever. So we have to look at it. We have to look at it from that perspective. So it's a welcome development, but I'm sure the economists and the people in the presidency who have put heads together will also be able to map out how these things can align with national development targets in terms of economic principles down the line, because at that point it leaves the realm of the energy industry, goes into financials, planning and accounting details.
Okay, now we're talking about Naira for Crude. Well, I've spoken to one or two persons. They still mention the fact that dollar, the exchange rate, still has something to do, in terms of bringing about price fluctuation in the price of petrol. So I really want to understand it. We're talking about Naira for Crude. So what does forex still have to do in all of this?
Yeah, because even though they are being paid in naira, or they are going to buy in naira, they are technically buying at the exchange rate. So it's not an arbitrary naira price. So if the crude oil is $70 per barrel, just for the purposes of an example, they are going to pay $70 times 1,500 or whatever the rate is. So if it's 1,500 times 70, and for any reason that exchange rate comes to 1,000, then that price automatically drops. The price they are paying for crude will automatically drop and become 70 times 1,000. So the real factor behind the increases is not so much as the activities of the production, because most of those things have been stable for a long time. The real factor behind the increases is the exchange rate of the dollar to the naira. And it's not just in the petroleum industry, it's across board, because we are a largely import nation. And I say this because in 2005 or thereabout 2006, we had a couple of trips. One of them I remember very vividly was to Europe. And I think that ticket cost about, was economic ticket, it was a cheap ticket, and it cost about $1,200, which at that time came to about 190 or 195,000 naira. The same ticket, when we bought it last year, was over 2 million naira. Almost 2 million naira. Sorry, almost 2 million naira. Now, what changed? The dollar value did not really change, maybe like $100 difference or something. But the difference between 190,000 and 1 point something million was the exchange rate in 2005 versus the exchange rate in 2025. So the exchange rate speaks directly to the value more than even the cost of production and everything else. So that's why the exchange rate is a big factor.
Okay, we're going to take a break now. The conversation will continue after the break. Don't go away.
The implementation of the ruling is also dependent on another aspect or another arm of government.
Nowhere in the world will allow, under digital economy, for banks not to be dispensing domestic currency in that economy.
What will make this one different? We want to know what they do as occupation. All of these are attributes that our questions have been designed to investigate.
In a few days to come, you see that we are all around their own crannies and everywhere in Nigeria, telling people to cooperate.
Welcome to Nigeria Today.
Welcome back. This is still Nigeria Today, and we are looking at the reduction in the PMS price. And of course, I have an energy expert here with me in the studio, Olabode Shomi. So, Olabode, with what you said earlier, some oil marketers and analysts have said, have predicted really, that the price of the PMS, the fuel, will continue to decline. Even down to 400 naira per liter, because of the global oil price. So how true is this, or is there any truth in this, and how can that be, or how? If
there isn't a significant change in the current political trend, yes, there will be continual decline. Whether the thing can get to 400 naira per liter, which we
need. Just a prediction, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If the current rate persists, 400 naira per liter will probably be about one barrel costing less than $1 or something like that. Something is quite ridiculous. So the only thing that can change that is if the exchange rate between the naira and the dollar comes to instead of 1,005, maybe it comes to like 500 to the dollar, 500 naira to $1. Yes, that can sound that amount, those figures can sound realistic. But the only thing that I see that is correct there, within a concept of analysis, is the fact that based on the politics that is going, the geopolitics that is currently going on, those things are expected to continue falling down. But there's a difference between analytical results, analysis in terms of results, and predictions. Yes, you can make some predictions which are inference from these things which are scientific, but there's those who are speaking like they have an insight, like a spiritual prophecy. That's a different ballgame, because analytical predictions is based on the facts that are at hand. So if you look at what is at hand and say, okay, oh, this woman got pregnant last week, in 9 months you're expecting delivery, that's scientific analysis. But if the person says it's going to be 8 months and 2 weeks, that's a different game. You get, maybe they are saying something else that we are not seeing. So for that 400 naira, that specific figure, that may be in another realm.
I just like the way you analyze it with so much seriousness in you. Okay, but try to say something that is very, very funny. Now, how can the governments, now we're talking about local refineries, this Dangote reducing price, and I must tell you, a lot of Nigerians are really, really happy about it. But again, the funny thing remains. Maybe I should have asked the marketers themselves. But then I think you can also give us answer to this. When there is an increase in price, immediately it reflects. But when there's a decrease in price, it takes time for us to start seeing it. Sometimes a week, sometimes 2 weeks. So what can possibly be the reason?
So basically, I mean, I can't speak for them, because one has to know the things that are there to. I think basically maybe they are trying to get rid of the old stock, and they don't want to incur a loss, because basically even when they increase, it's because that favors them. Sometimes they sell the old stock at a higher price. You understand? The excuse will be so that they can use that money to be able to buy the new stock and all that. But those are questions for the regulator. It's somebody that is monitoring the industry, really. Because the business person is first, the entrepreneurial greed is such that they want to maximize profit.
So how can we these kinds of reduction, really, from your own expert opinion, how can it be sustained over time, and even ensure that we have lower prices, even though you have said that there are certain prices that we just cannot talk about right now with the realities on the ground?
So what we have is a free market, and what the government has done in terms of its policies is to allow the thing to be dictated, the price to be dictated by market forces. So it's basically like any sale or any the factors that determine the price include the cost of crude, and that's the most important factor, because it's like 80 or 80 something percent of the cost. Now, when we look at the cost of crude, and the amount that it takes, what basically now needs to happen is that the primary thing that can affect it the most in letting the price go down is definitely outside the influence of the industry, which is the naira to the dollar exchange rate. That's the most realistic thing that can reduce the cost. There are a number of things that can go in, which incentives, operational excellence and all that, but those things are very marginal. And even in the reducing the cost, it may not be felt at the pump, because those price reduction could have been eroded by what it takes to get the products to the last mile. But the one that you are sure and can have very immediate significant impact is the naira to the dollar.
So what would be your advice? Because some have also talked about more refineries coming on board with the Dangote refinery reducing price. If we have more refineries, I know some, of course, you see that's from a layman now. More refineries coming on board will help.
So more refineries are going to give us competition. When there's competition, healthy competition, you don't take unfair advantage of people. it doesn't, the opportunity to take unfair advantage of people is not there, because there's competition. There's more products than demand. But competition does not mean they are going to run at a loss. It just means that they won't have excess profit in that sense.
Monopoly too.
Yes, the competition is the opposite of monopoly, direct opposite of monopoly. So what people think in terms of refineries is not necessarily, it doesn't even necessarily mean it's going to be cheaper, because it depends, there are so many factors that are there. But what it means is that they won't take advantage of Nigerians. There won't be excessive profiteering. Those things will not be there. Those are the primary promises of those kind of deals.
What would be your advice to really, you know, we also have our own refineries apart from the private refinery, the Dangote refinery. We, you know, we seem to focus more on the Dangote refinery. We have our own refineries. So what would be advice in that regard?
Our refineries can only do so much. I mean, those refineries are, some of them are 40 years old, 50 years old, and there was a long period that they were not working. So if they were not working, they are mechanical plants. So if they were not working, I mean, you have a car that you have not used for 5.5 years and it was parked, and then they service it, and it starts working once in a while. Maybe the pump can fail, and you stop you on the express. You'll fix that, and then maybe it's one valve that is cut. You'll be having those kind of things until the car gets to full functionality. That's the same thing with those refineries. As they are being fixed, there will be one or two things that will happen. Then, more importantly, even when they were brand new, they had such a certain capacity. Those capacities were relatively small, smaller than what Dangote has. So they can only produce so much. So I think part of the problem in terms of the issues is that the expectations from Nigerians, from those refineries, are misguided. You know, because it just it's a refinery. So if there are refineries that do 50,000 barrels per day. There are those that do 20,000 barrels per day, but they are all refineries. But that doesn't mean they are the same thing as the equivalent of Dangote.
Thank you very much, Labode Shomi, an energy expert and also a public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for coming on the program and sharing your perspective with us.
The pleasure is all mine.
And thank you for being part of the program. I'm Mikaela Clinton. Have a wonderful weekend.